You know, when you hear about drugs, you know, drugs open up portals to other dimensions and let things come in. And then they always say, oh, it's, you know, mushrooms or ayahuasca. And you have like, you know, that's kind of like the Peruvian jungle juice thing that's all a fad today. That you take a load of ayahuasca and you'll get answers, you get beings. Well, all these drugs do that, even alcohol. There was an Irish saint called Matt Talbot. When I was a kid, I was growing up, I was walking down this back alleyway somewhere in central Dublin, and there was a statue of the Virgin Mary kind of impregnated into a wall, and there was a little plaque saying, this is where Matt Talbot saw the Virgin Mary, and then gave up the drink, and, you know, and he became, when you hear this one, for Catholic kinky, he saw, you know, he was on the piss constantly, and he had the delirium tremors, and he saw this fictional being, probably a jinn or something, the Virgin Mary, and you know, he converts to mad Catholicism. He straps himself with chains for the rest of his S&M thing for the rest of his life, and walks around with chains on his body, an absolute pervert, creep show. And because he's chained himself up all his life, he's made into a saint. Don't ask. But he saw those visions because he was on vast amounts of alcohol. Now, there's one drug. I don't care if you want to like inject yourself with Coleman's mustard. That's your own business, okay? But there's one drug that I find reprehensible, and that's cocaine. Cocaine is an utterly reprehensible drug. It turns people into absolute douchebags. I've known people who got into cocaine who were perfectly normal before it, and they became almost psychopaths. And something close to it, protos. And cocaine is an appalling drug, but it's all. I used to believe that these are not. You know, I used to have mates who went on the cocaine back in the music days, and I'd say, he's not in there anymore. Where'd he go? Who is this piece of crap that's taking him off? Where'd he go? And I never knew about this, but I found this article that was posted on a blog from Paranoia magazine. And I had no idea. Now, I knew that David Bowie was a cokehead, a big nose candy head. And I knew Bowie was into kind of weird alien stuff. Like back in the late 60s, he used to take LSD and sit atop his flat in London holding a TV antenna, trying to talk to aliens, communicate with them. But it actually was a lot darker than that. And I want to read this article from Paranoia magazine, reproduced on this blog, or excerpted on this blog. And it's called Along Comes Mr. Scratch. And this blew my mind when I read it the other day. Like many rockers before and after, David had taken a liking to the good life. You know, the old adjectives, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, on top of this, add a heap of consciousness expansion and an interest in the occult, and you will have the prevalent influence of what might have been David Bowie's immortal being. But paranoia soon struck in the form of the old nemesis, nose candy, commonly known as cocaine. With the help of Bowie himself and some close associates at the time, Mark Spitz details in the just published Bowie biography how David was living in L.A. just a few houses away from the LaBianca estate, where Charles Manson's gang had terribly mutilated Sharon Tate and her friends in a ritualistic murder. Bowie had taken to doing blow regularly, and he was getting more and more desperate and paranoid with each passing day. In a number of shocking revelations, Mark Spitz, in the Bowie biography, explains precisely what was transpiring in the pop singer's troubled life. While planning the follow-up to Young Americans album, Bowie would sit in the house with a pile of high-quality cocaine on top of a glass coffee table, a sketch pad, and a stack of books. Psychic Self-Defense by Dion Fortune, actually a very good book, was his favourite. I actually have that book right. That's bizarre. I have that book by Dion Fortune like 3 inches behind me. I didn't even know that. Was his favourite. It's ordered to describe the book as a safeguard for protecting yourself against paranormal malevolence. Using this and more arcane books on witchcraft, white magic, and its malevolent counterpart, black magic, as rough guides to his own rapidly fragmenting psyche, Bowie began drawing protective pentagrams on every surface. Bowie told the author, "I'd stay up for weeks. Even people like Keith Richards were floored by it, and there were pieces of me all over the floor. I paid with the worst manic depression of my life. My psyche went through the roof. It just fractured into pieces. I was hallucinating 24 hours a day." Spitz said, increasingly Bowie was convinced that there were witches in his semen. Witches after his semen. They were intent on using it to make a child sacrifice to the devil, essentially the plot to Roman Polanski's 1968 supernatural classic, Rosemary's Baby. Seeing that he was in desperate need, poet and songwriter Cherry Vanilla hooked Bowie up with Valley Elmlark, who Spitz described as a Manhattan-based intellectual who taught classes at the New York School of Occult Arts and Sciences, then located on 14th Street, just north of Greenwich Village, and which the author of this article was director of from the mid-1960s for more than a decade, promoting lectures and classes by the who's who of paranormal and UFO experts of the area, including Cleve Baxter, Stanley Krippner, Jim Molesley, John Keel, and of course Wally Elmlark, the White Witch of New York. As added confirmation of the madness of David was trying to cope with, ex-wife Angie Bowie reveals even more details of his fascination and dabbling into the occult in her own personal remembrance, Backstage Passes, Life on the Wild Side of David Bowie. There was a beautiful Art Deco house on 6 acres, an exquisite site, property, and a terrific value at just $300,000. But he took one look at the detail I had noticed, a hexagram painted on the floor of a circular room by the previous owner, Gypsy Rose Lee. A great deal of coddling and reassurance got us through the crisis, and I went and found the Doherty Drive house. Built in the late 50s and early 60s, it was a white cube surrounding an indoor swimming pool. David liked the place, but I thought it was too small to meet our needs for very long, and I wasn't crazy about the pool. In my experience, indoor pools are always a problem. This one was no exception, albeit not in the usual ways. Its drawback was one I hadn't encountered before, and hadn't seen or heard of since. Satan lived in it. With his own eyes, David said, he had seen him, Satan, rising up out of the water one night. Feeling demonic forces moving in, David felt strongly that he needed an exorcism and asked that his newfound friend, White Witch Wally Elmlark, be called upon to lend her assistance to remove the evil from its surroundings. A Greek Orthodox church in LA would have done it for us. There was a priest available for such a service, the people had told me, but David wouldn't have it. No strangers allowed, he said. So there we stood, with just Wally's instructions and a few $100s worth of books, talismans, and assorted items from Hollywood's comprehensive selection of fine occult emporia. There he, David Bowie, was then primed and ready. The proper books and doodads were arranged on a big old-fashioned lectern. The incantation began, and although I had no idea what was being said or what language it was being said in, I couldn't stop a weird cold feeling rising up in me as David droned on and on. There's no easy or elegant way to do this, so I'll just say it straight. At a certain point in the ritual, the pool began to bubble. It bubbled vigorously, perhaps trashed is a better term, in a manner inconsistent with any explanation involving air filters or the like. The rock and roll couple watched in amazement. Angie says she tried to be flippant. Well, dear, aren't you clever? It seems to be working. Something's making a move, don't you think? But I couldn't keep it in. It was very, very strange, even after my recent experiences having trouble accepting what my eyes were seeing. Angie insists that she would peek through the glass doors leading to the pool every so often and was dumbfounded by what she saw. On the bottom of the pool was a large shadow, or stain, which had not been there before the ritual began. It was in the shape of a beast of the underworld. It reminded me of those twisted, tormented gargoyles screaming silently from the spires of medieval cathedrals. It was ugly, shocking, malevolent, and frightened me. I backed away from it, feeling very strange. Went through the doorway and told David what I'd seen, trying to be nonchalant, but not doing very well. He turned white, but eventually became revived enough to spend the rest of the night doing coke, but he wouldn't go near the pool. I still don't know what to think of that night. It runs directly counter to my pragmatism and my everyday faith in the integrity of the normal world, and it confuses me greatly. What troubles me the most is that if you were to call Stain the mark Satan, I don't see how I could argue with you. David, of course, insisted that we move from the house as quickly as possible, and we did. But I heard from reliable sources, Michael Lippman for one, the property's real estate agent, that the subsequent tenants haven't been able to remove the shadow, even though the pool has been painted over a number of times. The shadow always comes back. Now, this got me thinking about a few things. Firstly, as I've already spoken, that cocaine does open up, shall we say, other realities and other experiences to phenomena. But also the fact that Bowie was involved with these people that were very close to the Lubyanka and the Sharon Tate killings. And somehow I think if Ed Upperman or Joshua is listening, it's very close to process kind of stuff. And I definitely think the process church at the final judgment, it sounds very typically in that kind of scene. Hollywood, process were very West Coast, where, and they weren't very West Coast, actually very East Coast, but they were involved in Hollywood at that level. And you do wonder if there was something like that going on. On another level, what this also reminds me of is something I've wondered for a long time. Did Aleister Crowley create the Loch Ness Monster? We know he went down there to Boleskine Manor to perform the Abamelum, which is basically, if you say it, a ritual was basically to open up the gates of hell. That's basically, in a very simplistic term. But it was a grueling 3-month ritual where, Crowley had to get up early in the morning, starve himself, and all these other kinds of things. And in Crowley's typical form, he left. And it wasn't long after he left that, now I know there's been reports of the Loch Ness Monster, it going back to the 9th century, but some saint. But that was just one thing and had never been mentioned since. And every single lake on these islands has a monster in it, even up the road from me, that's some saint banished. It's everywhere. But the worst thing to do in ritual magic is to leave a ritual half finished. And you do wonder if Aleister Crowley created the Loch Ness Monster by, not finishing the Abamelum ritual. And this disturbance in Loch Ness, isn't it funny how we've come back from Liberace singing Loch Lomond to this? Well, the synchronicities are just flying tonight. What channel, Liberace? To this tonight, if there's something happened like this with Bowie, where some kind of water tulpa was created, it also brings home the whole realization of how deeply connected the occult and Hollywood are.